Colin Allred versus Ted Cruz. Their race for Senate has growing significance beyond the Lone Star State. We look at how the high stakes are boosting a surge of campaign cash and why it could influence races across Texas. Ken Paxton makes a lot of news, but when reporters ask him about it, they rarely get answers.
Accountability is just not there at all. That access is not there at all.
We dig into data showing how the Attorney General's office avoids questions from the media and why that raises questions about accountability to the public. A Texas law targets criminals who create counterfeit vehicle tags to cover up crimes, but a powerful group is pushing back. Why the law could be in jeopardy before it takes effect.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. We are about a week away from the start of early voting here in Texas, and one race on your ballot could have implications beyond the Lone Star State. We're talking about the race for Senate. Between Ted Cruz and Colin Allred, it's playing out amid a national battle between Democrats and Republicans to decide which party controls the Senate. Right now, Democrats have a narrow majority. The party holds 51 seats. That includes independents, Bernie Sanders and Joe Manchin, who usually vote with Democrats. But 34 Senate seats are on the ballot nationwide in November. Democrats hold 23 of them, and that means Republicans have fewer seats to defend and more opportunities to flip seats to take control of the chamber. One seat likely to flip red is in West Virginia, where Manchin is retiring. Polls show Montana Democrat Jon Tester is also at risk of losing his seat to the Republican challenger. Democrats looking for a win have turned to Texas, where polls continue to show a close race between Colin Allred and Ted Cruz. A poll of likely voters released Thursday by the New York Times and Siena College shows Allred trailing Cruz by 4 percentage points. That is within the poll's margin of error. Close polls and the nationwide stakes have boosted a surge of campaign cash coming into Texas. During the third fundraising quarter, Allred brought in $30 million. That's $9 million more than Ted Cruz. Political action committees are also putting millions toward the race. The latest round of campaign finance reports went public this week, and the numbers are having an impact in races across the state. We want to go a little deeper on this issue. Joining us is Jasper Scherer, the politics reporter for the Texas Tribune. Welcome.
Thank you.
And our very own Ryan Chandler. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
So, Ryan, you've been following the Senate race. Cruz consistently leads the polls, but Allred is ahead in campaign donations. Right. Is the money making a difference?
Well, certainly we've seen that Allred has narrowed the margins and shifted this race to be more competitive. But the question always is, how much does money really make a difference versus just the underlying political trends in this state? I'll give you one of my favorite anecdotes about Texas politics. Everybody remembers Beto O'Rourke, right? He spent $80 million. He was a household name running against Cruz in 2018. But do you remember who ran against Cruz the first time in 2012? Nobody does. It was a guy named Paul Sadler, and nobody remembers that name because he only spent $500,000 in that race. Cruz spent $14 million. But Sadler got 40% of the vote. 6 years later, O'Rourke runs, beats Sadler's spending by $79.5 million, and he gets around 47% of the vote. So all of those tens of million dollars of difference may have bought Beto, 4 to 5, maybe 6 points, but they're not making massive differences.
Jasper, you've been reporting on the donations that have been coming in for the races for State House. Where is this money actually coming from, and where is it really going?
So the battlefield this year is pretty narrow, first off, just because we're coming off a fairly recent redistricting round. So a lot of districts just haven't had the amount of time to kind of change demographically. So a lot of this is still concentrated in kind of a handful of districts. Some of them are in South Texas, which it's a broad term. Some kind of in the Rio Grande Valley. Some, there's this one district, Eddie Morales, a Republican a Democrat whose district goes from Eagle Pass all the way to El Paso. He was kind of, I was surprised that got so much attention in the latest round of campaign finance reports, but it looks like Greg Abbott, some of the Republicans see a chance to go after his seat, just looking at some of the the underlying trends. With the top of the ballot, that district was very closely contested in 2020. So that's kind of how these races are being targeted, I think, is looking at how Beto O'Rourke did, how Trump and Biden did in the districts. So a lot of these are South Texas, also a little bit in the San Antonio and Dallas suburbs, but that's kind of, it's still a pretty narrow landscape compared to what we're used to the last couple of cycles.
You know, Democrats are hoping to flip a few seats there, and Republicans also see the state house seats in play. What other races are the ones to watch there?
Yeah, I think there are a couple in, I was mentioning the Dallas suburbs. There's Morgan Meyer and Angie Chen Button. They are both the only two Republicans left in representing Dallas County in the state house. Those are both districts where Donald Trump would have carried them by less than a percentage point under the current boundaries 4 years ago. So that just, by default is kind of a top target for Democrats, I think. An even more favorable option for them is State Rep John Lujan in San Antonio. Christian Carranza, who's a Democratic organizer, political operative, she's running against John Lujan and has been raising competitive sums of money. So I think that's kind of the landscape beyond the South Texas races. Well,
these finance reports show so much more money is actually pouring into these campaigns. How does this spending compare to previous election cycles, Ryan?
We're blowing it out of the water. I mean, O'Rourke and Cruz set records at the end of the election, and at this point, with a month to go, we've already broken those records, and I mean, you can tell both Allred and Cruz, you'll see in a commercial break, are blanketing the airwaves, and not just with state money, but big national dollars. Even the DNC and the DSCC are both investing more heavily here because they see that this may be a better opportunity than Democrats have had in Texas in the past.
All right, Ryan, Jasper, thank you very much.
Thanks.
A Texas law will phase out paper vehicle tags in an effort to stop crime, but there could be a problem.
You have a bill that just passed, and now you're going to go and propose that we keep paper tags because of something that you just discovered?
We look at the pushback happening at the Capitol that could change the law. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton often makes headlines for his lawsuits, but Texans rarely hear from Paxton himself.
We need to be careful about the people we're electing because we need to make sure that they're going to be accountable and responsive to the public.
We dig into the data to see how often the Attorney General responds to questions. It's been more than a year since Texas lawmakers passed a bill phasing out paper vehicle tags amid rampant fraud, but now a trade association representing more than 1,200 auto dealerships is raising concerns. We've covered the path to this law in our Risky Rides series of investigations. It targets criminals creating counterfeit temporary tags to cover up crimes. Now, Investigator Matt Grant reports some law enforcement fear industry groups are trying to chip away at the law even before it takes effect.
So at this time, the chair calls up.
At a House Transportation Committee hearing,
I would encourage you to look at the issue as to whether or not we've actually gone forward and not backwards.
the Texas Automobile Dealers Association urged lawmakers to take another look at a new law set to take effect next July, replacing temporary paper license plates with metal ones. Their objection: metal tags can be faked.
With the cancellation of temporary tags, we're going to find ubiquitous metal tags, fraudulent or not, on the road.
Your testimony is spot on.
Democratic Chairman Terry Canales agreed the counterfeiting concerns should be looked into.
We're always trying to keep up with the criminals. They always find a better way. And so I don't know that a metal tag is any better.
Well, it makes me nervous.
Sergeant Jose Escribano is with the Travis County Constable's Office Precinct 3. He's investigated paper tag fraud all across the state for years and is considered a leading expert. He says TADA's concerns are new to him.
Well, where were you a year and a half ago? You have a bill that just passed, and now you're going to go and propose that we keep paper tags because of something that you just discovered. This is not recent. We could have had this conversation a long time ago.
Escribano says metal plate fraud isn't new, but easier to detect than paper tags, which aren't always picked up by license plate readers. TADA's Executive Vice President Karen Phillips declined to go on camera, but said she has concerns over whether the new law will solve Texas's tag fraud epidemic.
Do you feel like this is a Hail Mary to try to undo the law?
It appears that way, yes, absolutely. It looks like a Hail Mary to me, because why would you bring that up now and not back then?
At the Capitol, Matt Grant, State of Texas.
Testimony at the hearing detailed how the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles is finishing up a plan to implement the new law. Officials are working with DPS to make sure the new metal plates are hard to counterfeit. Plans call for having a third-party vendor distribute them to the state's 22,000 dealers. We've been following this story for several years. You can catch up on our Risky Rides investigations right now on our website. Just look for the link in this week's State of Texas story. Ken Paxton sends a lot of news releases, but he rarely takes questions from reporters.
The media is captured for the Democrats, and Republicans are tired of it, and some of them have said, look, I'm not talking to you anymore.
We look closer at the reason behind the radio silence and dig into the data amid concerns about accountability. Plus, a new effort to protect your right to clean air and water.
I've had a little bit more time to let people know what it is we're trying to accomplish with it, and we've gotten some groups that are getting behind it.
Why some lawmakers want you to vote on a green amendment to the Texas Constitution. We bring you a lot of stories about Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. His office often makes news for lawsuits concerning immigration, gun rights, abortion, and your right to vote, but we rarely hear from the Attorney General himself. Over the past year, our reporters have submitted dozens of requests for interviews and information to the Texas Attorney General's office. We have received exactly 0 responses, and Brian Chandler investigates why you don't hear more from the AG.
It's crickets inside and out at Attorney General Ken Paxton's office. This office has made a lot of noise recently. More than 200 press releases in the last year, in fact. And in just the last month, Ken Paxton has sued Bexar County for voter registration programs, Austin for an out-of-state abortion fund, and Dallas for the state fair's firearm ban. All lawsuits that have real impact on people's lives and carry a real cost to taxpayers. They demand real answers. But all we get in response to our questions is crickets.
Democracy runs on information. The flow of that information, 2 ways, is essential. Today, the path of least resistance is controlling your own media destiny through your own media. You want to talk threat to democracy? That is an existential threat to democracy.
This deceitful impeachment attempt.
This was 506 days ago, one of only 2 press conferences Paxton has held since.
Thank you all very much.
He did not take questions.
Are you going to answer General Paxton? We're not taking questions in the press conference.
Email data that we obtained through the Texas Public Information Act shows the main press contact in the AG's office received over 2,700 emails in the last 6 months. They responded to 8.
I have a problem with the person spending my tax dollars not being accountable to me.
And Paxton's office spends a lot on their press team. The communications director makes more than $213,000 a year. That's more than the White House press secretary.
We need to be careful about the people we're electing because we need to make sure that they're going to be accountable and responsive to the public.
Paxton's allies suggest the estranged relationship is the press's fault.
I want you to imagine everything associated with your name for 10 years is Ken Paxton under indictment for securities fraud.
His impeachment attorney explains why Paxton primarily speaks to conservative outlets.
Certainly you see it on a national level that the media is captured for the Democrats, and Republicans are tired of it, and some of them have said, look, I'm not talking to you anymore.
Longtime journalists argue the press can do more to improve the relationship.
The press owes it to the public first to go the extra mile in trying to be as fair and balanced and equal, in all capital letters, bold face, as it's humanly possible to be. I don't think that happens all the time, to be quite frank about it.
We gave the Attorney General's press team more than a week to respond to our questions related to this story. We did not receive a response. Ryan Chandler, State of Texas.
On Thursday, we received another news release from Paxton's office. This one, a statement on the state's challenge to the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program known as DACA. The Obama-era federal program offers protection to people brought to the United States illegally when they were children, letting them stay in the country without fear of deportation. Paxton's office is fighting to end those protections. And on Thursday, the federal Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals heard the state's challenge to DACA. Judging by his news release, Paxton thought it went well. He wrote, "The court was receptive to our arguments that DACA continues to violate the rule of law and the separation of powers requirement enshrined by the United States Constitution." Paxton added that he looks forward to defeating DACA permanently. Protests happen outside the Fifth Circuit Courthouse in New Orleans, where the Texas AG's office argued the case. At stake is the future of about 500,000 people who have long established lives in the U.S., even though they are not citizens or legal residency status, and face potential deportation. A key element of the arguments before the appeals panel is whether the state of Texas has shown it has standing to bring a lawsuit and whether a lower court judge in Texas had authority to issue a nationwide ruling. A ruling last year by a district judge in Texas claimed President Barack Obama overstepped his constitutional authority to create DACA. It is unclear when or how the Fifth Circuit will rule on the question of if the program can remain in effect. It is likely that the case will eventually end up before the Supreme Court.
We all know we depend on clean water and clean air to survive, to thrive.
There is a new call to change the Texas Constitution. It's part of a nationwide movement. Why some lawmakers want you to vote on new environmental protections. Some lawmakers are leading a push to bring a nationwide movement to the Lone Star State, and it could add protections for the planet to the Texas Constitution. A handful of states have added so-called green amendments to their state constitutions. Among other things, it would protect Texans' right to clean air and water. Senior science reporter Erik Henrikson takes a closer look.
Could the Bill of Rights in Texas soon see a change?
We all know we depend on clean water and clean air to survive, to thrive for our very lives.
Maya Van Rossum is leading the charge, pushing for a new green amendment to be added to the state constitution.
Because of that Bill of Rights placement and the careful choice of language, it lifts up environmental rights.
It's part of a nationwide movement to add green amendments to every state constitution.
They're all just plain, clear statements about these environmental essentials of life and that they need to be recognized and protected at that constitutional level.
It's actually a very short amendment, and it basically says that current Texans have the right to clean air, clean water, healthy soil, fauna, etc.
State Representative Vicki Goodwin, who represents Travis County, drafted her own version of the Green Amendment last session. She says it did not get a hearing, but she's hoping to build momentum ahead of the next session in January.
I've had a little bit more time to let people know what it is we're trying to accomplish with it, and we've gotten some groups that are getting behind it.
Representative Goodwin says the amendment could give Texans extra bite when protecting their land, giving them additional avenues for legal action.
If the state agency isn't penalizing a company for polluting a waterway, for example, an individual could say, well, you're going against my constitutional right to a clean river.
Van Rossum says this has been the case in several other states. Currently, Montana, Pennsylvania, and New York have green amendments in their constitutions. 18 other states have proposed the amendment.
It would be great if Texas was on the leading edge of this environmental movement, but it may take some time.
Erik Henrikson, State of Texas.
After almost every legislative session, lawmakers ask Texas voters to consider adding amendments, but passing an amendment is not easy in Texas. First, the legislature needs to pass a joint resolution to put the issue before voters. It requires a 2/3 vote in both chambers. That's at least 100 members from the Texas House and 21 from the Senate. Then a majority of Texas voters have to approve the amendment in an election. You may remember last year's constitutional amendment election in Texas. Voters passed 13 propositions. That included a proposition to lower property taxes. Voters also approved an amendment to provide retired teachers with cost of living increases, as well as measures to create funds investing in broadband, water infrastructure, and state parks. A measure to raise the mandatory retirement age for judges failed to pass. But voters did pass 13 out of 14 propositions, continuing a historical trend where most amendments get approved. Since 1876, lawmakers have put 711 proposed constitutional amendments on the ballot. Texas voters approved 530 of them, meaning nearly 75% became part of the Texas Constitution. You heard from Representative Vicki Goodwin in Erik's story, and you could be hearing more from her in the future. Earlier this year, she told us she's considering a run for lieutenant governor.
I am considering running for lieutenant governor. I think the state needs better leadership, and I haven't been too quiet about that, but the gun issue is one, gun safety. You know, we have so many people in the state of Texas saying that we need some gun safety laws to be passed. We had a couple of good bills that passed the House. The lieutenant governor wouldn't let them pass the Senate, so that's certainly one of the considerations for me running for that position.
Goodwin also listed support for public schools and her opposition to voucher plans as incentive for a potential run for lieutenant governor in 2026. For now, though, Goodwin is facing Republican Scott Fursing in the November election for the District 47 Texas House seat. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle, and we'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.